Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. Before we dive into this heartwarming story, hit subscribe so you'll never miss the most courageous dog tales we share every day. We've all heard the phrase, "A dog's a man's best friend." But what if that friendship went beyond companionship? What if a dog's unwavering loyalty and instinct could not only save a life, but unravel a cold case that had been buried for 23 years? This is the story of Officer Liam Croft and his K-9 partner Jax, a dog so disciplined and predictable that his single defiant act of disobedience sent a shockwave through an entire federal courthouse. It's a story that proves sometimes the most profound truths are whispered not in words, but in the frantic scratching of claws against a cage and the quiet stillness of a dog who simply knows. Get ready for a tale that will make you question everything you think you know about trust, instinct, and the unseen heroes among us. Every morning, the world of Officer Liam Croft and his partner, a black Labrador named Jax, followed a script, a perfectly written script of predictable professionalism. Their days moved to the rhythm of morning briefings, precinct check-ins, and the familiar scent of asphalt on their standard patrol loop. Jax was a 4-year veteran, a K-9 with an impeccable record, and a nose so sharp it could tell a rogue firecracker from an explosive device. He was more than a dog. He was a machine of discipline, a 4-legged embodiment of the rulebook. Liam liked it that way. Predictable, professional, safe. But that morning, the script got thrown out. It started with a low whine from the back seat as they drove past the federal courthouse, a landmark they usually just drove past. At first, Liam brushed it off, thinking it was the usual "I see a squirrel" routine. But the whine turned into a deep growl, a sound he had never heard Jax make in the car before. Jax's body went rigid, his desperate claws scratching against the reinforced cage, a frantic drumbeat of alarm. "Easy, buddy, we're not stopping here." Liam muttered, his voice a calm he didn't quite feel. Then came the twist. Jax let out a bark, so sharp, so urgent, that Liam's foot slammed the brake pedal instinctively. Not once in 4 years had Jax barked inside the car. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a false alarm. Something was wrong, and Jax knew it. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled to the curb and opened the back door. Before he could even clip on the leash, Jax lunged out nose down, tail stiff, his focus a laser beam aimed at the courthouse entrance. "What the hell's gotten into you?" Liam muttered, latching the leash and tightening his grip. It was like holding a sled dog in a race. Jax towed him across the pavement with unstoppable force. Inside the courthouse was business as usual, the low murmur of legal teams, the buzz of security scanners. Until the doors burst open, Jax charged in, like a heat-seeking missile, yanking Liam through the entrance with a force that nearly sent him tumbling over the metal detector. People froze. A bailiff reached for his radio. "It's okay," Liam said quickly, flashing his badge. "K-9 unit." He caught a scent. "I don't know what yet." The bailiff narrowed his eyes. "You sure he's not going rogue?" Liam shook his head, a line of unwavering faith on his lips. "Jax doesn't go rogue. Not ever." Jax's claws clicked across the marble floor as he zigzagged through the front atrium, his nose twitching like a machine. This couldn't be drugs or a bomb. The courthouse had already been cleared. The twist came when Jax made a sharp left toward courtroom B, where a child custody hearing was in progress. Liam commanded him to heel, but Jax didn't listen. With one final lunge, he pushed open the heavy double doors, and that's when the entire room turned upside down. The air was heavy with tension lawyers, arguing, a young social worker watching from the back. At the center of it all, a young girl named Elena sat quietly on a bench. Jax stormed past them all, a black blur, and vanished under the judge's podium. The room fell silent. Liam dropped to his knees, his heart pounding, and peered beneath the wooden platform. Tucked into the crawl space behind the support beam was a small bundle of blankets trembling and breathing. A little girl. Mia. She was 4 years old and had been missing inside the courthouse for over 3 hours. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a revelation. A dog who, without a word, had thrown out the rulebook to save a life everyone else had missed. But as the medics took Mia and the chaos subsided, Liam couldn't shake the unease. The look in Jax's eyes, the intensity of his search. Something told Liam that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a much larger, more haunting mystery. And the first clue wasn't what they had found, but what Jax had glanced at for a split second on his way to the bench. That silent, observant girl in the gallery, Elena. The rescue of Mia should have been the end of it. A clear-cut, heroic win. The media, of course, had a field day. Headlines screamed about the dog who broke protocol and the K-9 unit's unlikely hero. Talk show hosts replayed the courtroom footage of Jax barreling down the aisle, treating it like a viral meme. But for Liam and for Jax, the story wasn't over. Something about the incident had clung to them both, a stubborn static that refused to fade. For 3 days, Jax was restless. He wasn't barking or pacing, but his breathing was shallow. His ears were constantly perked, as if he was searching for something that wasn't there. Liam too found himself lost in thought, replaying the chaotic scene in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Mia, a lost little girl, and the quiet, composed girl in the gallery who had watched it all unfold, Elena. The courtroom had mostly cleared after Mia's rescue. Lawyers and officers whispered in the hall, and the judge had recessed the hearing. But Elena Cruz hadn't moved from her seat. Her small hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes, wide and watchful, followed every motion Jax made as he circled back to Liam when the medics finally got Mia. Elena did something that no one else thought to do. She walked straight over to the sobbing little girl, sat down beside her, and started talking in gentle, quiet Spanish. "That little one calmed down faster than anything I've ever seen," the judge would later tell Liam. "That's something worth remembering." Liam couldn't get that moment out of his head. He knew it wasn't his job to intervene, but a sense of unfinished business began to itch at him. He found himself thinking about Elena, the girl who had been in the system for 2 years, bounced between 4 homes. She, like Mia, knew what it felt like to be overlooked. He decided to pay a visit to her foster home, not in uniform, but in jeans and a jacket that still smelled faintly of dog treats. When he whistled and Jax trotted in, Elena's face lit up. "He's soft," she said, patting Jax's head. "He likes you," Liam replied. "That's not always the case with him." As they sat on a picnic bench, Liam found the courage to ask her what had been on his mind. "When Jax ran into that courtroom, did you know what was happening?" Elena hesitated, looking at her new family raking leaves nearby. "I saw Mia when she came in," she said softly. "I thought maybe she was with someone, but then I didn't see her again." Liam studied her face. "But you weren't surprised when Jax found her?" Elena dropped her rake. "I wasn't." She sat down, scratching Jax behind the ear. "I've been in a lot of places where people don't see you," she said. "But dogs do. They always do." Liam swallowed hard. "I think you see things too." This quiet conversation confirmed Liam's hunch. Jax hadn't just followed a scent. He had reacted to something deeper, an emotional frequency that only a few could tune into. He and Elena were a mirror of each other, 2 souls who saw the unseen. But the unease still lingered. Why was Jax still so restless? Liam started to feel a different kind of conviction. Maybe Jax wasn't reacting to what was there, but to what was missing. He typed a new note in his phone, "Unresolved." And so as the world moved on from the courthouse story, Liam and Jax's journey was just beginning. It was no longer about a single rescue, but about a hidden truth, a secret that had been silently echoing through the halls of justice for decades. What followed was a journey into the past, guided by a restless K-9, and the quiet observations of a girl who understood what it meant to be forgotten. Jax's restlessness didn't fade. It was a constant low-grade hum of anxiety that followed him everywhere, a ghost in his system that no amount of petting or praise could exorcise. For Liam, it was a nagging suspicion that grew into a certainty. Something in that courthouse was still unresolved. He knew what he had to do. He drove to the Jefferson County Courthouse, not for patrol or court, but to look, to listen. He walked the sterile marble halls with Jax on a loose leash, a stark contrast to their frenzied sprint a few weeks prior. They weren't chasing anything. They were just listening. And then it happened. As they passed courtroom D, Jax stopped. He stiffened ears pinned forward and let out a low, urgent whine exactly like the day he found Mia. Liam knelt beside him, his heart pounding. "What do you smell?" he whispered. Jax's nose pressed against a vent in the baseboard. With his multi-tool, Liam pried open the loose grate, shining his flashlight inside. The vent was empty, but Jax wouldn't budge. He reached in further, his fingers brushing against something soft. He pulled out a faded piece of cloth, blue child-sized, with a tiny embroidered letter E on the hem. The discovery of the cloth was a punch to the gut. Liam brought it to the courthouse evidence team, who confirmed the fibers were years old, possibly decades. He spent hours digging into courthouse archives, searching for any child whose name started with E who might have gone missing. That's when he stumbled upon it, a sealed case from 2001. Case 02391, minor Eloise Grant. Female age 6, disappeared inside the Jefferson County Courthouse. The last place she was seen, a custody hearing in courtroom D. The case was closed without a formal resolution, and she was declared missing, presumed abducted. Liam leaned back in his chair, a cold dread washing over him. The cloth, the vent courtroom D, it wasn't random at all. He immediately forwarded the file to Judge Evans with a single message. "I think this deserves another look." Her response came in 12 minutes. "Come to chambers first thing tomorrow. Bring Jax." Together, they returned to courtroom D, a silent vigil. Jax moved to the vent again, whining low. This time, as Liam shined his flashlight into the duct, something glittered. He pulled out a small rusted silver locket. Inside was a tiny photo of a freckled girl with big eyes and in permanent marker the name, Eloise, age 6. The ghost of a long-lost child had finally been found. But as cold case investigators moved in, a detail began to haunt Liam. Every file referenced Eloise's presence in courtroom D, but no one, not a single document confirmed who had brought her there that day. As he dug deeper, one name kept popping up in the janitorial logs from 2001 for courtroom D Silas Cole. A quiet guy wore a brown custodial uniform, kept his head down. Liam had passed him in the hall every week. As Liam stood to leave, Jax bristled a low growl deep in his throat. A soft shuffle echoed in the hall, and a voice cut through the silence. "Looking into old ghosts, Officer Croft." Silas Cole stood in the hall, mop bucket beside him, his eyes fixed. His face was blank, but his tone was not. "Some things ought to stay where they're put," he said with a thin, joyless smile, and walked away. Liam crouched beside Jax. "I don't think he likes us very much," he whispered. Jax licked his lips, his low growl a promise. This wasn't just a cold case, it was a ghost that was very much alive. Silas Cole's words, "Some things ought to stay where they're put," weren't a warning, they were a confession. Liam knew it in his gut, and Jax confirmed it with the low, steady growl he kept rumbling deep in his throat as the janitor's mop bucket squeaked away down the hall. Liam didn't hesitate. He headed straight for Judge Evans's office, a new sense of urgency burning in his chest. Within the hour, she had quietly approved a limited warrant to investigate Silas's assigned spaces, the courthouse's south wing, the custodial supply closet, and the basement maintenance access. They entered the dimly lit, musty basement at dusk. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decades of neglect. Exposed pipes ran overhead, and the cinder block walls seemed to hold their own silent secrets. The janitor's room was tucked away in a far corner, a locked metal door with a faded clipboard bolted to the outside. Liam used the key they had pulled from security. The door opened with a dry creak, revealing the usual clutter brooms, bleach gloves, a dusty radio. But it wasn't the clutter that drew Jax's attention. It was the floor. The dog stiffened, then slowly approached a square of scuffed linoleum that didn't quite match the rest. He sniffed once, twice, and sat his eyes locked on the spot. Liam knelt beside him, his breath catching in his throat. Faint seams were just barely visible. Using his knife, he lifted a corner. What he found beneath made his stomach turn. Hand-cut wooden panels nailed shut and warped with time. and beneath that, the faint, undeniable scent of decay. They called it in. Within an hour, the floor was pried up, revealing a shallow cavity barely 3 feet deep. Inside, amidst the dust and dirt, were the remnants of a child's blanket, fragments of bone, and a tiny pink shoe, with the sole worn nearly smooth. Camera shutters clicked as the forensic team moved in, but Jax didn't bark or growl. He simply lay down beside the opening, his body curved protectively toward it, a final silent guardian for a soul that had been forgotten. The DNA results would take a few days, but everyone already knew. It was Eloise Grant, the girl who vanished in 2001. Silas Cole didn't show up for work the next day. When investigators visited his apartment, they found it spotless, scrubbed clean and empty. But Jax found something else in a heating vent, a folded piece of newspaper from 2001, a clipping about Eloise's disappearance with a note scrawled on it in shaky ballpoint pen. "You should have stopped digging." The manhunt was on. The trail went cold for days, but it was Elena who provided the final heartbreaking clue. She came home from school one afternoon and turned pale. Parked 3 houses down was a brown custodial van. Liam arrived to find the van gone, but Jax picked up a faint scent. The trail led them half a mile into the forest behind the neighborhood to an old irrigation canal. There, in a clearing, they found Silas's bag, canned food rope gloves, and a rusted photo of a girl in a courthouse gallery. It was Eloise. 20 minutes later, they found him backed into a gully. "Hands where I can see them!" Liam commanded, his weapon raised. But Silas didn't resist. "You weren't supposed to find her," he muttered, staring at the dirt. "I thought if no one found her, no one would remember her." Jax stood stiff beside Liam, tail rigid. Liam took a deep breath, his voice thick with emotion. "Well, she was remembered, and now she's found." A week later, they held a small memorial on the courthouse steps. Judge Evans, her eyes soft with emotion, led the remarks. Alara's distant relatives had been tracked down and brought in their presence, a quiet testament to a memory that refused to be erased. Flowers were laid in a circle, and a plaque was installed beside courtroom D. It read, "In memory of Alara Grant, a child whose voice was lost but never forgotten." Jax stood beside it the entire time, motionless and silent, a final guardian in a story that had spanned over 2 decades. The most powerful moment came when Elena, now officially a member of the Martinez family, read a letter she had written herself. Her chin was held high, and her voice was steady. It ended with a simple, profound truth. "Alara, I didn't know you, but I felt you. We all did. You mattered." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd, not even Liam's. That evening back at home, Liam opened the front door and let Jax off his leash. For the first time in weeks, the dog trotted to the living room, circled once, and lay down without an ounce of tension. No whines, no pacing, no searching. He was finally at peace. Liam stood there for a long moment, watching him breathe, and whispered, "Good job, partner." A month later, Jax officially retired from field duty. It wasn't because he couldn't work anymore, but because he deserved peace. Liam kept him as a companion, his vest now reserved for school visits and courthouse events, not for chasing down bad guys or sniffing out dark corners. He had done his part, and then some. Elena came over every Friday, and they would often sit on the porch with Jax between them, sharing a quiet understanding. One afternoon, she asked Liam, "Do you think dogs have feelings like people?" Liam thought for a moment before answering, "I think they have something better. They don't need words. They just know." Elena smiled. "I think Jax knew what I was feeling before I even knew it." This wasn't just the story of a rescue dog. It was the story of what happens when someone finally listens to instinct, to silence, to the invisible signs we all miss. Sometimes the greatest heroes aren't the ones who arrive with sirens blaring. They're the ones who refuse to stop until every voice is heard, even the smallest one. Thank you for following this journey with us. From Elena's courage to Jax's loyalty to Alara's final justice, this story was about more than a mystery. It was about second chances, unseen pain, and the quiet power of compassion. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever known a dog or a person who seemed to understand you without saying a word? Leave us a comment and share your story below. And if you believe in the power of loyalty, love, and the animals that make us better humans, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community here at Heroes for Animals. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness lead to the biggest rescues.